of as we welcome in 1320 Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, James Ham. James, I see you working hard today. Let's dive right into it. We'll treat it like a game show. Most intriguing name on this list to you?
Will Hardy.
Aha! I like it. I like it. Least intriguing.
Mark Jackson.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, Mark Jackson. Mike D'Antoni, because I mean he would be a lot of fun, but this isn't about one season. It's not about 2 seasons, and you have to be, you got to plan for the future. I think it's an interesting list. I think it's a really interesting list.
Why does Will Hardy stand out to you?
Number one, because he's not a name that has been thrown out there a bunch that everyone is like seeing all the time. Even if you look at the guys like Charles Lee and Darvin Ham, those are guys that like have been in line or have been mentioned related to this job over the last, I don't know, like couple of weeks, but also they're guys that were being interviewed last year for head coaching jobs. Will Hardy, number one, he's 34. So he's the youngest of the group. Charles Lee is, I think, 47. I mean, at 37. Darvin Ham is 47, 48. Some of these guys are around that age. But 34, spent 11 seasons in the Spurs organization, working his way up from a video coordinator to an assistant coach. He spent 5 years as an assistant, left with Ime Udoka to be his lead assistant in Boston. Some of that stuff reminds me a little bit of Eric Spoelstra. And he's a guy that, I'm intrigued. Like, the problem is when you have young guys or you have assistants, is there is no track record. So if you don't have a track record for these guys, then, you're kind of speculating, and you're going to have an interview process and see how they work out. And then once you get through the interview process, you're going to see, whether you like them or not, whether they really are someone that stands out to you that you want to build your franchise around. And so I think, hopefully they have the right people interviewing. That would be a good start. But I think this is going to be a fun process.
One of the names that wasn't mentioned in that list was a name that was mentioned initially, and that's Kenny Atkinson. Is that just, I mean, what do you think about that? Is that a situation where maybe the Kings, scratched him off the list, or maybe Kenny Atkinson said no, or, some of the reports were that's what the list is for now. It still could be Kenny Atkinson moving forward.
Okay, so I've been on the phone since, I don't know, when this whole thing started to break. And just from what I know, the Kings had a list. Kenny Atkinson was initially on that list. They whittled the list down. They did their due diligence on every single one of these players, every single one of these coaches. And at the end of the day, this is a 7 that they're moving forward with. So this was the list that they felt comfortable moving forward with, whatever that means, whether there was something that they didn't love, or there was some conversation that they had that like made them go a different way. But Kenny Atkinson, from what I know, just, realistically, he didn't make the 7-man list. And that's probably, when you see lists that are out there, a lot of these are fan lists. A lot of them are, some rumors and innuendos. But at the end of the day, Monty has a lot riding on this. Wes Wilcox has a lot riding on this. They went with a list that they felt comfortable moving forward with. The plan is for this list to get whittled down to maybe 2 or 4 candidates that will come in after Zoom interviews. So we'll start with Zoom interviews next week. We'll whittle the list down to 2 to 4 people. Maybe 5 if something crazy happens. Some of these guys are still in the playoffs. And so the Kings might have to travel to them, but the hope is to get some of these guys in the door and actually show them around and, give them the 5-star treatment and figure out what it is that is happening here in Sacramento. I also know that while this list is the list, of available coaches right now. We saw this morning that James Borrego became available. There's potential for one or two other coaches.
Quinn
There,
Snyder.
yeah, there is a soft out here if there is someone that becomes available, and this list adjusts. That the Kings would, be able to maybe expand and get someone else in here, at least an interview with somebody if they can. So yeah, I mean, I think we've got a pretty solid list, and this is a list of the people that they think, as of right now, they're ready to move forward with. People who aren't on this list, either A, have a job, or could become available. But so this is the list that they are moving forward with, and again, Kenny Atkinson isn't on that list.
Yeah, it's so what James is saying is it's going to be Dave Yeager all over again. Monty McNair is going to go through all of these interviews. Utah Jazz are going to be eliminated. Quinn Snyder is going to walk right in and become the next Sacramento Kings head coach.
Monty's going to say, never again.
Yeah. Like, look, I've talked about Quinn Snyder for years. He's a leader of men. He's someone that gets 100% buy-in from his players. We're seeing that wane now.
Feels like that percentage is starting to drop, especially after last night's game.
Yeah, but we're seeing that it's taken this much time for that to drop, and I think again that Charlotte job is gonna be an intriguing job for certain people. The Lakers job is gonna be an intriguing job for probably a different group of people. All of these jobs are different in their own way, but when you're looking at the Kings job specifically, I think that you got a couple of things going for you. Number one, cap flexibility going forward. Number two, Sabonis and Fox. Number three, draft picks. Number four, like some reasonably good players that will be back no matter what, that you can build around. So I think that there's potential here there. And I think the biggest thing with Sacramento, it's the same thing that, Monty McNair has said. It's the same thing that De'Aaron Fox said. The same thing that Sabonis said. If you are the guy that fixes it and gets it on the right path and wins and gets the playoffs, you will be revered here. And that's something that I think is a point of sale. Like when you're telling somebody about the job, you have to understand that is a huge thing. If you can be the guy who snapped a 16-year drought, you're going to have a lot of cachet in this city, but also a lot of cachet around the league going forward.
And that bar is relatively low. Like when you talk about the other jobs that would be available, the Lakers, the Hornets, we're throwing Utah in there, maybe prematurely, but we're throwing them in there. Of those, spots, you're expected to do more than just make the playoffs or the play-in, or there's no streak to play. You talk about the Lakers, we talk about championships. We talk about the Hornets, we're talking about possibly getting a team to our Eastern Conference Finals. What you said, which is 100% correct, if you get a playoff berth here as a head coach, like that's you're verified, you're certified out here, and that's, you would think, a low bar to reach. Like all I got to do is make the playoffs, and I'll probably get an extension. What? You know what I'm saying? Like that would be appealing to some of these coaches, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I think it's hugely appealing. And, I think if you're a head coach and you're looking around and, you see an aging Lakers roster with year one, the potential to be great is very, very, like you're walking a slim line there for the Lakers team to be good next year. Sure, you got LeBron, but what does he turn, like 37, 38? That
You
he's
might only
going to
have
want
him
to play.
for a year too.
Yeah, because he's going to want to go play for with his son the next year. So you put yourself in a situation where, is Anthony Davis going to be the guy that can carry you forward for years? And, look, I think that the Sacramento job, well, it's not the glitz and the glamour of the Lakers job. I think the Charlotte job is probably even more appealing than the Sacramento job. It's just whether you want to live in Charlotte and all that stuff. But because in Charlotte,
Not a bad city.
Well, it's not a bad city, but you're you're really a second. You play second fiddle, third fiddle to the college game there. And so it's not like Sacramento where you're the only game in town and the focus is on you and the fan base is all there for you. But still, there's a lot of talent on that team. And so, like, I would think that that job would probably be a little bit higher than the Sacramento job. The Utah job is going to be interesting because it looked like it could be a complete teardown. Like the way that things are imploding and the way that your stars are like not playing well together and don't appear to want to be there or play together again, that's a problem. And so, again, I think that job is one that you kind of look at and go, okay, is that a great job? I don't know. Is this a complete reboot? Probably. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe the Sacramento job is a good one. And if you push forward fast enough, again, I think their time frame is next week is Zoom calls. Whittle it down to 2 to 4 people. And once you get that 2 to 4 people, you're going to do in-person interviews, whether that's, in a place like Milwaukee or Boston, or you can get someone here on an off day. So that's going to be the next step. And then from there, we're looking at early a coach in here relatively quick.
Your internet stream is not cooperating with us today. No, I was trying to ignore it, but it's no, we're good. Your internet stream, I believe, is the Mike D'Antoni of internet streams right now. Like it's been reliable for a long time, but at this point, like, it feels like it could be rocky. I got to stop taking shots at Mike D'Antoni, by the way. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. But the three would-be first-time head coaches are the names I like the most and the most intrigued by, with one exception, and that's Mike Brown. Just looking at Mike Brown's resume and what he did in Cleveland and what he was able to even do that year in Los Angeles, and I wish he had not gone back to Cleveland. He spent the last 6 years in Golden State. He's still young. I think Mike Brown would be a hell of a coach here.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Mike Brown, but I also saw that what he looked like without LeBron. And I don't think that's really fair to judge somebody on how you look with, I mean, because remember the stat was LeBron James, and this is when franchises weren't worth all that much money, not like they are today, but, when a franchise was worth about $800 million, that losing LeBron James had a $100 million plus impact on the franchise valuation. So you can't just say that, like, when you lose LeBron James, you lose the best player in the game and he goes away, you're going to be bad. Like, there's no way around it. So I just think that, like, when you look at some of the other stops, that they just weren't, like, super impressive. And he spent the last 6 years working on Steve Kerr's staff, right? And I think you can gain some incredible experience with that. But here's the big giant, like, thing that I'll put in there. If you look at, like, his win-loss record with the Warriors, you're playing with a great team. Like, you're coaching a great team. And again, like, you look at Mike Budenholzer's like tenure in Milwaukee and these guys that are under Budenholzer, like, that, it's great, right? But Sacramento Kings don't have Giannis Antetokounmpo. So, like, what are you coaching? Are you going to be coaching the same type of player? What I want is a guy who has a system that can put in place, that gets players to play for him hard, that gets 100% buy-in. That's the guy who walks in the room and captures your imagination and goes, okay, like, this is the guy. I will follow this guy, even as a general manager. I will follow this guy. We're going to go to war with this guy, because that's a feeling you get from the interview. I'm hoping that the Kings have, will find that guy on this list. And whether, again, it's D'Antoni, which is, again, it's just, I really like what Mike D'Antoni's done throughout his career. It's a blast to watch. The Kings aren't a franchise that needs to worry about, can he get you over the hump and to a championship. No, they got to get you to the playoffs before you worry about something like that.
Get you to the hump.
Yeah, like the hump is like really, it's like Mount Everest. It's the hump in Sacramento. And so, like, D'Antoni can get you there. My concern is, again, like, I don't want to be like an ageist guy, but he's
Yeah,
almost 71 years
that's
old.
right.
I mean, May 8th, he turned 71 years old. I looked it up when I was doing my post, and I'm like, okay, that's tough. Like,
Mhm.
you need to bring on assistants that are going to be there for it. And like, I've always enjoyed interviewing Mike D'Antoni. I even one time, Riccardo Pertizzi is a Italian writer. He worked for NBA Italy for a long time, and like Sky and like huge newspapers. Anyway, like one time he said he came up to me. He was here to cover Marco Bellinelli, and then Bellinelli left, and he stuck around because he could cover Warriors and Kings. And he said, "Hey, I need someone to run my camera today. I got a one-on-one with Mike D'Antoni," and I'm like, "Okay, that's fine with me." So he set up his camera. He goes, all you have to do is like make sure the focus is there and just hit the play button and just make sure nothing goes wrong. I'm like, okay. Watching a full-fledged Italian interview where you have no idea what's being said by either person, because people forget Mike D'Antoni was a superstar in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
He
Kobe
left the
Bryant
NBA
player.
game. He went to Italy, was a superstar. He lived in Italy forever. He speaks Italian fluently. And like watching that interview was just, it also gave you a different point of view on D'Antoni, because like there's one way that he speaks to American media, and then to watch him feel really comfortable with somebody and speak Italian was totally different. And it was a one-on-one. It was different. So again, like I have no idea what they said, but you can read the body language and stuff. And so like, look, I'm intrigued. The guy's been nothing but brilliant at the NBA level. He wears himself out, and he wears himself out of situations pretty quick. But still, he superstar coach.
Yeah. Now, and the other thing about this, and I'm just asking the question, just to broadcast around. Damien, don't leave. No, don't do this, Damien. Don't do this. Okay. Don't leave. I know everybody is like the Kings are terrible on defense, and we need a guy that focuses on defense. And my retort to that is always, you can get a guy that focuses on defense all you want. If you don't have players that can execute what he's doing, it's not going to matter. So this is kind of where D'Antoni comes in, or maybe somebody else. The idea of kind of doubling down on what you do. You have the ability to have like a really, really good offense. Like you had a shooter to this team with Fox's quickness, with Sabonis can do passing. You could have, I don't want to get crazy, but like top end type of offense with this team. What do you think about the prospect of just kind of going all in on that? That would be like a D'Antoni thing. Like, hey, defense, we don't have the personnel for that anyway. Let's be the absolute best offensive team we could be.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you have to have great defensive players if you hope to have a great defense. I mean, you can have solid defensive players and a good scheme, and you can scheme your way through quite a few things. I mean, that's kind of like the golden age of Kings basketball. They schemed their way through with guys like Elston Turner, T.R. Dunn, like working defensive sets. And I think we're seeing that with Minnesota, with Elston Turner in Minnesota. Like he's figured out a way to get a whole group of bad defensive players to buy in, and have.
Nope.
Hammond-
Finally quit.
Hammond with
Finally
the
over.
hush, little
over.
baby, don't you cry.
All right, R.I.P. James Ham's internet. Man, what a day. On a big day. You see, before he got here, he was working on the Kings beat. He was getting the newsletter out to all the subscribers, putting that work in, probably preparing for a pod with Brandon Nunez. James beat his internet down today, and this is the result. This is the result of what happens when we have breaking Kings news and we have James on in the final hour of the show versus when the breaking news happens.
Well,
and I'm just going to leave that frozen. I'm going to leave that. He'll be back, but I'm going to leave that frozen picture of James Ham up there. Honestly, it's in memory of James for those that are watching on Twitch and YouTube and Facebook. It's RIP to James Ham. We'll leave that picture up. Oh, we lost him. Oh.
James, much like D'Antoni, he wore out his internet.
That's what he did. That's what he did. Or perhaps, like Mike D'Antoni, his internet is 70, and his internet had a good run. And maybe we just need to upgrade his damn internet. That's all I'm saying about Mike D'Antoni. He's had a great run. I don't know.
Nah, and I want to reiterate. I don't think it'll be Mike D'Antoni. I think they're doing their due diligence. I do. I think this is part of it. You got a relationship with D'Antoni.
Also,
you talk to him. Some of these interviews as well. Sorry, Damien. Some of these interviews are to maybe get an outside perspective of your organization, and almost like not crowdsourcing, but coach sourcing, league sourcing.
sure.
Like what's going on? Like D'Antoni, like what would you do? What you could be not tricking them, but like what would you do to fix the Sacramento Kings? You have no intentions of hiring them, but you want to pick his brain.
Well, coaches sniff that stuff out though. Like I don't think they do that. I think they'll have honest discussions, but I just thought of this a moment ago because Kyle said it regarding Mark Jackson. Yeah, I don't know if Mark is going to be your coach, in 3 years for completely different reasons. How long is Mike D'Antoni going to be your coach?
No.
Again, we're talking as if it's down to Mike D'Antoni and one other guy. We're just trying to go over the different names on the list, and Mike D'Antoni is obviously one of those. James is getting reconnected. We can sort of see him now. So we'll step out. We'll come back. When we return, James Ham will, in fact, be with us. There he is. We'll be back with more from our 1320 Kings insider, James Ham, here on Sacramento's #1 sports station, ESPN 1320. All right, we were due for a break. We'll just get it out the way. We'll come back. We'll all be
Sorry about that. I have no idea.
That's all right. It looks like mine's having trouble now. So
yeah, I had to jump off and do all just start closing windows and everything else.
You working hard, Ham?
Once again,
working hard.
AT&T. Little baby, don't you cry.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That commercial is rather humorous.
Jesus.
The poor kid.
I think we're all having internet troubles.
Oh, we're on break. I'm going to duck out and I'm going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go. I don't know what you just said, but go ahead and do it. Okay. You going to duck out? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm going to reboot.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Verizon. Yeah. Verizon's been having some troubles.
Yeah, I heard the other day, like they were down for hours. Like people,
I think they were down for damn near a day. Like you'd call someone on Verizon and like you'd get like a call failed notice. They get text.
Crazy.
Couldn't call.
But they couldn't call. Who?
Yeah, I know. Thank goodness.
I called somebody yesterday, and it was the weirdest thing, right? Because I called them, and I usually would text, right? But as I was calling them, I was thinking like, probably seeing me call, like, why is this dude calling me? Like, and that's like where we're at is, in cell phone use and phone use and stuff like that. It feels awkward to call somebody on the phone. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's got to be like super serious to call somebody. I think a FaceTime is even before just a telephone call.
Yeah.
True
story.
No, good, Ramsey. That's good to know.
Yeah. What's the scoreboard? Okay.
Same score.
222 to 8. Back from the dead on Easter Sunday. James Ham.
We might have to go Fedora Ham and try to fix this thing. Jesus.
Well, you sound great now. You look great. We'll see how long it lasts. I got the little rainbow a minute ago, so we'll see what happens.
Something was bogging. I don't know what it was. It's yeah. It asked me if I'd like to restart my 46 tabs, 26 tabs, and I said yes. So
I'm sure it'll go smoothly.
All right.
It'll go smoothly. Hey, KC, did you hear anything about this weekend?
Big Mike hit me up and he's like, I'm still I ain't forgot about you guys.
Okay.
That was last night.
Okay. Yeah, I won't say the other part of the message that he sent me on the stream, but
yeah, I think he told me.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I think it's supposed to start today.
Not anymore.
Oh, it didn't. They didn't do it at all.
No. Went from 3 to 2 to perhaps not at all. Big facts. Big facts. Yeah. Processor's probably struggling there, Hammer.
No, we're fine. We're fine.
James, do you remember Devin Brown?
Yeah.
Shooting guard for the Spurs. Well, he played for a few, but Spurs and Cavs are what we're talking about.
Okay.
Damian said he looked like Eddie Winslow, and he did. I thought he looked like Usher too.
Ja Morant's dad is Usher. It's the only.
I just want to get your attention. Hey, girl.
All right, we're coming back, guys. Pray for James's internet. All right, we're back here. James Ham is in full force. He closed 46 of his 47 open tabs. Did a little reboot here. He's got the Kings Beat newsletter out to the world. And we are here to talk Kings basketball. I'm sure there's going to be a podcast recorded with Brandon Nunez here pretty soon. Make sure you subscribe to the Kings Beat podcast, wherever you get podcasts from, the Kings Beat newsletter over at thekingsbeat.com. And, of course, the news today is that the first look at the Sacramento Kings list has come out. James, you did say there could be some wiggle room to this list if perhaps a coach who is in the playoffs right now gets eliminated from the playoffs and suddenly finds himself without a job. Maybe Sacramento gives that particular coach a call and they come in. But right now it appears to be Mike D'Antoni, Mark Jackson, Mike Brown, Steve Clifford, along with Milwaukee assistants Darvin Ham and Charles Lee, and Boston's assistant Will Hardy. I don't remember. We were talking Mike Brown. Kenny was teeing up the system. I believe we were talking about Mike Brown and Mike D'Antoni. I don't remember exactly where we were when your internet went haywire on us. So we can move on to another candidate that I don't particularly love, that I actually don't think will fit. And I'd argue it might be the only one out of all of these that I'd go, I think this is going to be a disaster. Steve Clifford.
Yeah. I mean, I feel for Steve Clifford because he really never got a shot with a good team, So we talk about some of these guys who, how do you judge somebody who has, like in Atlanta had 5 All-Stars and did really well, and Mike Budenholzer, how do you judge him? And then he goes to, and all of a sudden he's got Giannis and, the development stuff like that, all that's good, and Chris Middleton and all. So like it's really hard to judge somebody like really negatively when they've had like all of these really good players. I mean, Phil Jackson won how many rings, and how many rings did he win without Michael and Scotty or Kobe and Shaq or Kobe and Pau? Like, he won a lot of championships, but he also had a minimum of 2 Hall of Famers on his team at all times, right? So there are certain coaches who make Hall of Famers. There are certain coaches who, inherit Hall of Famers. I think Tim Duncan would have been a Hall of Famer regardless of whether he went to the Spurs or not. But I can tell you that guys like Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker may not have been Hall of Famers, and they are Hall of Famers now, or they will be. Ginobili's in, and Parker will be in because they went to a system and a place that's the right place. I think if you're the Kings, you need to find that. And I think that's why you're looking at guys who came from the Spurs or are part of the deep-rooted Greg Popovich coaching tree. So, again, I would like to be really hard on Steve Clifford, but let's just go back and look at the talent on the teams he was on. And, is the talent any different here that he's going to take over? So he didn't prove that he could be a difference maker with marginal talent. Would he be able to do that the next time? And I'm going to guess the answer is probably no.
And I didn't mean that in an X's and O's fashion or that he can't be a good coach. I mean, Steve Clifford has a very, very, very strong personality. And I think you used the example one time because we heard this stupid thing about the jazz and the marching band. Well, we've used the word structure with De'Aaron Fox, right? Oh, you want structure? Cool. Meet your new head coach, Steve Clifford. You want a structure? You're gonna get it. Steve Clifford might have a curfew. Like you might have to be back in your room at 9 p.m. if Steve Clifford is the coach. Like he ain't about that mess, which in some ways is a good thing. In NBA today, like there's probably got to be a little leeway in that sense. Steve Clifford's he's a tough coach.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a possibility that he's learned from his mistakes, right? I think that's what. It's funny. Eric Musselman coached the Golden State Warriors. It didn't go well, and he realized that he was too strict and all of these things. And he was very young. When he got a second go around, he tried to take things a different way, and he took things too far, and then ended up getting himself in trouble and fired in Sacramento. I think he's learned from both of those situations and gone on to become just an exceptional college basketball coach. It's a different lifestyle, all that stuff. So I think coaches can learn, and they can come back different. We talked about this with Dave Yeager, where Dave Yeager, like him and Ron Tillery, like wanted to fight every single pre and post game interview, and then that wasn't, when he got to Sacramento. He had moments with some media members, but overall, he had learned that if you burn bridges outside, if you burn bridges with the media, they'll burn you down. And so it's not hard to see where someone could learn, but I'm not sure that Steve Clifford is going to be willing to take that step. And I think, like, again, you have like a guy who is not known as like a quote unquote players coach. And then a guy like Mike Brown, who I think probably is a players coach. I think you need to find somewhere happy in the middle. And you got to see if you can find that guy. And, I think D'Antoni requires a lot of, he's a demanding coach as well. But, everyone's got their different style. You just hope that they continuously evolve in their coaching style. And I think the good thing about, again, some of these assistants, they spent so much time learning systems from guys who are successful. So, again, if you're going to be on Mike Budenholzer's staff for 8 or 9 years, I think Charles Lee is 8 years and Darvin Ham is 9 years. You learn not just X's and O's. You learn about how to run a system, about how to build a culture, about how to, design something that is sustainable and works. And that's why they're on this list. And if you look at Mike Budenholzer before that, he spent 17 years as an assistant on the Spurs staff before he took his first head coaching job. And so you don't just glean these things in 1 or 2 years, say, oh, I was on so-and-so staff for a year, and then next thing you know, you're ready to roll. That, again, if we talk about, the young guy on this, Will Hardy, like he spent 11 years with the Spurs. And then when he did go to the Boston Celtics, it was to take on a higher responsibility job with another Spurs assistant. Mm-hmm. That's what you did. He went to support his guy in Emi Udoka in Boston and get a new experience. Because you can't just be, I guess you can't just be a guy who worked 17 years for one spot and then find success in your first one like Budenholzer does. That's like so rare for that to happen. So you do need other experiences. And again, Hardy is a guy that I like circle and like, ooh, I'm really intrigued because he was supposed to be the heir apparent to Popovich. And if he was that highly regarded there, and again, eventually you take your opportunities, and if Popovich doesn't want to step away, you're not going to push him out, but and eventually you got to go make your own path. He's a guy that I think is really intriguing for me.
Man, good stuff, man. Do you think that Monty and this team is looking for potentially somebody that the team can grow with the coach, where like you talk about Will Hardy, and you compare that to Steve Clifford or, Mike D'Antoni or something, or maybe even Mike Brown. Mike Brown's a little younger than those guys, but maybe they want somebody like a Will Hardy, like Darvin Ham, and the assistants, where they can say, "Hey, we want this team to grow with this coach." And we think it can happen relatively fast. This isn't like a long project, but we want this guy to be here 6, 7, 8 years. And Fox and Sabonis and Davion, they all grow together, almost like what you have a little bit in the Golden State. Where I know Mark Jackson did his thing, but essentially Curry and Draymond and Klay Thompson all grew with Steve Kerr at that time.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so many different ways to figure this thing out, to get to the league and to find success. I would say the trend right now is not to go with the quote unquote retreads, because we're seeing so much success from guys like Chris Finch and guys like Taylor Jenkins. We're seeing like instant success where the modern young coach coming into the league has so many more tools at his disposal than coaches from years past. It was like, like when Jerry Reynolds started with the Kings, it was like Phil Johnson and him. That was it. Like, you didn't have like 6 assistants and 4 developmental guys and then a head of developmental. Like, there weren't all of these people all around. So like the modern assistant, I think, part of it is that there's so many tools available to people at such a young age. I mean, there are guys that I started blogging with, in 2010, but even before that, 2006, 7, 8, that like ended up in front offices because they were able to get a synergy account and start breaking down basketball at such a high level. And we're just seeing it's everyone has the ability to go watch and clip video now. And I think it starts, guys who start in the film room, they look at the game a different way and they build themselves up. So I think going with a young guy is probably something that is the most intriguing to me. It also has a like recipe for disaster. You get someone in that just is too young for the job and doesn't get it and doesn't either put in the work or doesn't understand all the nuances of what it is to be a head coach. Even like talking to Doug Christie, and Doug again isn't on this list, and I don't think he will be on this list. But I've talked to Doug after the season, and he had taken notes, like tedious notes all the time about the process all season long. And he said, I don't even have time to process any of this. I just have to take notes, and then I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to start letting my brain process all this information, because when you're in it and you figure out that you're not so much an assistant coach as you are a guy with a fire extinguisher running around trying to put out a fire that keeps popping up all over. And, 17 games into a season, you got a new head coach and you're learning. And not only did you lose an assistant coach in that because Alvin moves up, COVID, there's all these things, right? So like, you got to have some experience in this. And that's why, every single one of these guys, they've been, even, Will Hardy has been an assistant for 5 years, 6 years now. Like, he's seen a lot and a lot of success at one point, but then also a lot of not really successful seasons in San Antonio where you're grinding because you don't have the talent to compete. And then you go to Boston, you're getting a new experience where Emi Udoka was on the ropes early on and it was a disaster, and he pulls out of it and he figures out a way to, again, get everyone to buy in and everyone's pulling together, and all of a sudden they could be the team to beat. They could be the team that ends up winning this whole thing. And it's with a first-year head coach that figured it out middle of the season. So I think there is a lot of coaches right now that are, they're getting to the league in different paths. And again, you look at Darvin Ham and Charles Lee, 2 guys who have been on the same staff for 8 years together. Both of them took completely different paths to the league. Darvin Ham was a guy who worked his way into the league as like a high-flying, crazy hustle player. Where Charles Lee went to Europe and played in Europe and came back and has found his way into onto a coaching staff and built himself up in a different way. So I don't think there is any pure one way to do everything. But I do think that finding guys who have been in systems that are structured right and they can bring that to you and your franchise is a good thing.
James, I don't want to focus too much on. I'm glad you brought up Doug Christie because that was something that came up in an earlier conversation as well. And there's obviously been a lot of talk about Kenny Atkinson because he was a name that we heard a little bit about earlier and earlier in the process. And you explained why you believe he's not on this one. And a name that Kenny and I failed to mention, but you didn't in the Kings Beat newsletter, is Terry Stotts.
Yeah.
Terry Stotts, a name not on this list that it's funny. It surprises me he's not on the list, but at the same time, when the list came out, I didn't immediately think of Terry Stotts until I looked here at the Kings Beat newsletter. Why do you think he was left off of this list, or why he's not a part of this search?
It's a good question. To be honest with you, I asked a lot of questions when I was doing my due diligence before I jumped on the radio. And that's one that I forgot to ask about, like very specifically. But it's, Terry Stotts, it's very possible that he wasn't interested,
Sure.
or that the system, the lack of defense in Portland was an issue. I think Terry Stotts would be an exceptional head coach. He's a guy who comes across just one way, but I think behind the scenes is completely different. He is more of a player's coach. He is a guy, like, when he wears his funny suits and stuff, it's like, holy cow, man. He's got a great sense of humor. I like Terry Stotts. I always enjoyed covering Terry Stotts. Like, when you go and you have conversations with guys, you do glean a lot from it. The way that they handle people, the way that they are, whether they're respectful about questions or not. If someone asks a question that doesn't really make any sense, some coaches will just like blow you up or ignore you, or some coaches will take the question, think about it in their head about what you were trying to ask, and say, you know what, I think you're trying to ask this, and I'll answer it that way. I think Terry Stotts is a thoughtful guy, and he's very successful, and I was slightly surprised too, and that's why I added his name, because when you're going through it, you're like, man, there's one or two that I'm missing here that should have been on this list. And if the first one that popped up was Atkinson, but then the second one was clearly Stotts, where you're like, okay, that is a strange omission. But again, it could just
he could be tired too. He's been in the league a long time.
Yeah, it could be that. It could be that he's made enough money, he doesn't need to do it and doesn't want the stress of it. It could be that he just has no interest in the Sacramento job. That he's seen what's happened here, or that he had.
I can't imagine. Wow.
Yeah, or that he had a friend that went through the Sacramento situation and like told them, it's probably not the best situation for you. Or it could be that he's already had conversations with teams like the Lakers, or he's looking at the Charlotte job and already has like, or the Utah job if it becomes available. Again, that might be a situation that makes sense for a guy like that. And so I think there are a lot of reasons why guys aren't on this list, but we can focus on the 7 coaches that are on the list, and have like pretty good conversations about it, because there's a lot of diversity.
Terry knows first round playoff exits aren't going to get it done here in Sacramento.
We don't stand for that.
We don't. That's right. We very literally don't stand for first round playoff exits.
The funny thing that you say, because we forget about the human element of it, right? And when you just said Terry Stotts might just be tired and not want to do it. Like, he's been in the league for a long time. He's been a lifer. I remember I was listening to something about Buster Posey, right? And they were like, yeah, Buster Posey, they wanted him to be at opening day, but he says he's going to Disney World with his kids or something like that. And then somebody was like, yeah, this is like the first spring since he was like 6 where he hasn't had something to do. And like, you forget about that. Terry Stotts, this might be the first time, in 20, 30 plus years, he hasn't had to worry about training camp or, scouting or anything. I could just watch these games, maybe enjoying it. That's a great point by you, Damien, that you forget there's also a human element thing to all these guys as well.
Yeah, for the last 12 years, I haven't been able to go on, our kids have October break and then they have spring break. Yeah. Like, I can't leave. I mean, and I can't we have friends who go to Mexico all the time, and like, hey, we want to go the last week of June. I'm like, yeah, that ain't happening. That's a draft. And well, what about the first week of July, first 2 weeks? I'm like, nope. I got till July 10th when the NBA moratorium ends. If you can go like the third week in July, I'm good to go. But then, well, that's when the weather changes. And like, there's always things that you're trapped into a schedule. And if you've made a bunch of money as a head coach in the league for 8 years in Portland, I don't know, I like conservatively, what, 30 million? That's like super conservatively. Like maybe he just doesn't want to do it, or he's comfortable where he's at, or he's finding somewhere that already he's deeper in the conversation with and is more interested in.
Sports media vacations are in August, by the way. That's where we take them right before the NFL season starts. Maybe a little training camp, like no NBA yet. We get in, we get out, and then we hunker down for the next.
We get a Christmas break, like in school. Like,
yeah, but if you have kids, your kids go back to school like the second week of August, and you got to fit things in.
I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
No. Like you talk about Christmas break. Did y'all notice when Christmas is this year?
What, Saturday?
Yeah.
Why do
Saturday is like Sunday.
That should be illegal.
Like Christmas Eve is Saturday. Christmas Day is Sunday. That's back-to-back 5-day work weeks.
We're leaving on Friday. See you Monday.
Yeah, we're going on Christmas break here on Friday. We'll see you guys Monday.
Oh man, that should be illegal.
Go world.
I like that. That reminds me of the time, not the time, but in 2020 when all the holidays, like the fun holidays, were lined up. We're like, oh, 2020 is gonna be crazy.
Oh,
4th of July's on a Saturday. Halloween's on a Saturday. It's gonna be crazy, and we got to experience none of it.
We made it till March 11th. We made it till March 11th. Hey, one more thing, James, non-coaching related. We talked about it with Bobby Marks earlier, and we've talked about this on a number of occasions. But the Domantas Sabonis extension and how important the hire is, how important the next this offseason is, where the Kings almost like Domantas Sabonis almost certainly won't sign that extension because of the amount of money that he can make, so much more money as a free agent. So the Kings are really going to have to put him in a great situation to where he's going to be able to do what he wants to, but he's going to want to sign here because there's no advantage to him to sign an extension. In fact, there's a massive disadvantage to sign an extension when the Kings are able to offer it.
Yeah, I haven't done the numbers yet. What did Bobby say the numbers?
I think
were?
we had it earlier. I think I think it was like 15.
Yeah.
It was a substantial amount of money. It was like $15 million difference.
Okay, a $15 million difference. Okay, so I get that, and normally with most players, I would say like it's a huge deal. But we're not talking about $15 million a year, right? Or was it?
No, I think it was 15 a year.
Yeah,
because they
$200 million deal on the free.
Okay, yeah. So he can only sign for a certain amount over the cap. Yeah, I'll have to go do the salary cap analysis on it. And I to be honest, I hadn't dug into it because it's so far off in the distance.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes sense, and that's where like Bobby Marks and why am I drawing a blank? The CBA guru, Larry Kuhn. That's where those guys really come in. They do great work, and I love the salary cap and I love digging into it. But I usually dig into it at specific times for specific reasons, which is free agency's coming or extensions are coming, and we got to get closer to it. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. You have to get this right, and you need to make sure. Again, he wants to be part of the conversation. I would at least listen to him. I did hear very distinctly that. At the end of the day that, Monty McNair is going to make his decision, and he doesn't want to put players in awkward positions where, you could hurt feelings or something like that, or they give a big giant thumbs up to somebody and then they take the blame for it down the road and stuff like